Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Nathan Boyd, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is leading aircraftman Tyler Cooper. This evening, we are honoured to welcome Vice Air Marshal Rajiv Kumar Oberoi, Assistant Chief of Air Staff, India, accompanied by Air Vice Marshal Stephen Meredith, Deputy Chief of Air Force, and the accompanying delegation. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free, with golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is good by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. Enjoy from the strange land, let us sing. Advance Australia fair.
The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had done for us and what they had endured. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who gave their lives for us in war and on operation for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of floral tributes will now be laid by the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Isaac David Davies. Isaac Davies was born on the 23rd of August 1817 to John and Jane Davies of Dunolly, Victoria. He was educated at a school in nearby Canberra. In 1902, he enlisted in the 4th Battalion of the Australian Commonwealth Horse, sailing for service in the Boer War in March 1902. Within days of the contingent's arrival at Lansfontein, word came through that peace had been declared. Trooper Davies ended his short involvement in the Boer War, returning to Australia in August 1902. In 1906, Isaac Davies married Rebecca Turner in Victoria. The couple would go on to have a daughter named Sarah, but in 1909, Isaac's wife died. Isaac later moved to Western Australia, possibly accompanied by his parents and daughter. His father went on to work for many years as the local foreman at Kew. A qualified engine driver like his father, Isaac worked as an engineer in an iceworks at Geraldton. Isaac Davies enlisted for service in the Australian Imperial Force in July 1915. He underwent a period of training in Australia before leaving for active service overseas with reinforcements to the 28th Battalion. 2 days before he left Australia, he married Mary Elizabeth Hodge in Mount Waverley, Perth. He would write to her as often as he could, sending either a full letter or a card to let her know how he was getting on. Private Davies was first sent to Egypt, joining the bulk of the AIF which returned from fighting on Gallipoli. He continued training in the desert for 2 months before being sent on to France. The 28th Battalion was one of the first battalions to be sent to France, and the men arrived in the middle of a snowstorm. Davies wrote, "I shall never forget how cold it was. We stopped for a little while in billets and then went straight into the firing line, and have I been there ever since." The 28th Battalion first entered the front line in a quieter sector of the Western Front in order to gain experience of conditions there. Davies wrote to his wife, we do not have a bad time in the trenches. The only thing is having our clothes and boots on so long." Although at the age of 38, Davies was older than most of his fellow soldiers, he stood the hard life well. He wrote, "Since I wrote to you last, we have marched for 6 days. There were a lot of the men falling out the last 2 days with blistered feet, but I can stand the marches as well as the best of them." On the 23rd of July, the Australians, having been sent south to Somme, captured the French village of Pozières. Some days later, the 28th Battalion entered the front line to continue the advance and captured 2 strong German trenches to the northeast of the village. Davies wrote to his wife, "I can still go into action with the same feeling that I will come out without a scratch, and with our present style of fighting. I am not afraid of any Fritz single-handed." When the attack went ahead on the evening of the 28th of July, 1916, Private Isaac Davies would not have a chance to take on any Germans single-handed. As the men of the 28th Battalion launched their attack and rushed across no man's land, they discovered extensive barbed wire where emplacements had not been touched by the preparatory bombardments that were supposed to have destroyed it. As each wave of infantry came across, they washed up against the wire, and the German machine gunners had their choice of targets as the Australian tried to find a way through. More than 200 men of the 28th Battalion were reported to have been killed or wounded in the 24 hours that followed the attack on the German lines near Pozières. More than 500 men, half of the battalion's strength, became casualties that day. Private Isaac Davies was one of more than 250 men from the 28th reported missing at the end of the battle, a number repeated in Australian battalions up and down the line. Investigations were unable to determine what happened to Isaac Davies. While he had most likely been killed by machine gun fire, he might have fallen victim to the heavy artillery fire that characterised the Pozières battlefield. It is likely that any of his mates who would have given information as to his fate had been killed alongside him. The best investigators could do was to determine that he had not been taken prisoner and was not in hospital. Therefore, they concluded he must have been killed in action. Private Isaac Davies' remains were never identified, and today is commemorated on the Australian National Memorial at Villers-Brettoneux, alongside more than 10,000 Australians who died on the Somme and have no known grave. He was 39 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his name listed on the Australian National Memorial at Villers-Brettoneux is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Isaac David Davies, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.